how can you tell a visionary from a con artist? It's something we're always trying to figure out, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Especially these days, whether it's
Right.
tech CEOs or politicians or, even
Oh, I know what you're going to say.
clowns.
Clowns.
Yeah.
Okay.
John Wayne Gacy, the killer clown.
Right.
So today we're taking a deep dive into his life and trying to unravel this whole twisted story. We've got articles, podcasts, even some excerpts from a book about his final victim.
Wow, a lot of material.
A lot.
Well, it's a fascinating case and disturbing.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
No kidding. And it really gets at the core of what we're doing here, right?
Yeah.
Grifter or gifted. I mean, was Gacy a visionary with a dark side or just a master manipulator?
Right. I mean, that's the question. Someone who built this whole persona to hide his crimes.
Exactly. And the thing is, this guy was so deeply involved in his community. The JCs, charity events, he even ran for office.
More than once, actually.
Oh,
He was
okay.
really active, held leadership positions, organized all kinds of things.
So you'd think he was a model citizen.
From the outside, absolutely, but underneath it all, he was committing these terrible acts, targeting young men, boys mostly, often luring them in with promises of work.
Yeah, through his construction company.
Right. PDM contractors. And his modus operandi was just chillin'. He'd gain their trust, use tricks sometimes even, before restraining, torturing, and killing them.
It's just, I can't even imagine the level of premeditation there.
No, it's really disturbing.
And then you add the whole clown persona on top of it.
Right? Pogo the clown.
Yeah, and Patches, right?
Patches, too. Performing at hospitals, parties, you name it.
It's so creepy. It's like he was playing with this light and dark thing.
Yeah, that juxtaposition of this happy clown with these horrific crimes. It's really unsettling.
What makes you question, like, was the clowning some genuine desire to bring joy, or was it just a way to disarm potential victims?
I mean, that's what we're trying to figure out. Was it some twisted psychological outlet? Was it all calculated?
Right. And the scariest part is that he got away with it for years.
Years. This facade of normalcy, the perfect cover, it's terrifying.
So how did it all finally unravel?
Well, it started with a missing teenager named Robert Piest.
Right, I remember hearing about that. Wasn't there something about a pharmacy receipt?
Yes, a receipt found in Gacy's trash.
Wow. A tiny detail that brought the whole thing down.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It linked Gacy directly to Piest and led to a search warrant for his house.
And that's when they found
29 bodies in the crawl space.
29.
29.
God. I mean, just the scale of it. It's unimaginable.
It really is. It sent shockwaves through the whole country.
Yeah.
It really makes you think about the darkness that can hide beneath the surface. Like how well can you ever really know anyone?
Exactly.
I mean, how many people in his community thought they knew this guy?
Right. And it gets to the heart of what we're talking about. Was all that community involvement, the JCs, the charity work, was it genuine?
Right. Or was it all part of this calculated plan to build a positive image?
Like a smokescreen.
Exactly. And that's what we're going to keep digging into. But first, let's talk about something that adds a whole other layer to this story.
What's that?
Gacy's art.
You mean like while he was on death row?
While he was on death row, over 2,000 paintings, clowns, landscapes, even Disney characters.
And people buy this stuff.
Oh, yeah. They fetch a pretty penny. We're talking $6,000 to $175,000.
Wow. I mean, that's crazy. The art of a serial killer being bought and sold, it's kind of messed up, right?
It's definitely unsettling, raises all sorts of ethical questions.
Yeah, like can you separate the art from the artist?
Right. Should you? Or is it always going to be tainted by who created it?
And then you have the victims' families.
Absolutely. I mean, imagine how they must feel knowing someone's profiting off this guy's legacy. And it gets even more complicated when you have nonprofits wrestling with whether or not to accept money from the sale of this art.
I could see how that would be a tough decision.
Yeah. Do you prioritize the good that the money could do, or do you say, no, this is just wrong?
A real ethical dilemma. It really makes you think about the whole commodification of evil.
Yeah, it's heavy stuff.
And it all circles back to those big questions about Gacy himself. Was he a visionary or a con man? How did he manage to fool so many people for so long?
And what does that say about us? About how we judge character, how we define good and evil.
So many layers to this story.
So many layers, and we're just getting started. It's hard to wrap your head around how he got away with it for so long.
Yeah, that keeps coming back to me.
Right. But before we get too deep into that, I think it's important to remember the victims.
Oh, absolutely. We can't lose sight of that.
Right. These were real people, young men and boys, each with their own lives, families who loved them.
It's heartbreaking.
And the scale of it, it's just 29 bodies found in his crawl space.
29. And there's speculation that there might be even more.
Right. Some people think he may have buried victims at a property he worked at in Miami.
Miami?
Yeah, for a short time. There have
Right.
even been searches, ground-penetrating radar,
Wow. And did they find anything?
nothing conclusive.
But there are still unidentified victims, right?
That's right. Even now, the Cook County Sheriff's Office is still working to identify them.
It's been decades.
It has, but they're using DNA analysis, forensic techniques, all the latest stuff.
It's incredible that they're still working on this case.
It's a testament to their dedication.
They even have a podcast, right?
We do. It's called Just Science.
Trying to raise awareness, I guess.
Yeah, encouraging people to come forward with any information they might have, no matter how small.
Even after all these years.
Every victim deserves to be identified, to have their story told, to be remembered.
And speaking of remembering, there was one victim who survived one of Gacy's attacks.
Jeffrey Rignall.
Right. He actually wrote a book about it.
Yeah, 29 Below.
It's a pretty tough read.
It is, but it gives you a glimpse into what those victims went through.
That dark world that Gacy created.
And Rignall's survival, his willingness to come forward and share his story, that was huge.
It really helped expose Gacy for what he was.
It takes a lot of courage to do that, to relive that kind of trauma.
So how did the investigators finally catch up with him?
Well, it all started with that pharmacy receipt.
The one linking him to Robert Piest.
Yep. From there, they started piecing everything together, surveillance, witness interviews.
Must have been a lot of pressure. I mean, this guy was a master manipulator.
Oh, he tried everything. Denials, deflection, even trying to charm the detectives.
But they didn't let him get away with it.
No, they were persistent. They followed the evidence, built their case, and finally exposed him.
It's kind of reassuring, to see that kind of dedication.
It is, but it also makes you wonder, could they have stopped him sooner?
Yeah, like were there missed opportunities, signs that people ignored?
That's a question that a lot of the victims' families struggle with.
It's hard to imagine that kind of pain, knowing that maybe if someone had spoken up, things could have been different.
It really underscores the need for vigilance, trusting your gut, not dismissing those red flags.
Yeah. No matter how charming someone might seem.
Exactly. And creating a culture where victors feel safe to come forward.
We have to support survivors, make sure justice is served.
That's so important.
But, there's another aspect of this case that we haven't talked about yet. Gacy's art.
Oh, right.
He created thousands of paintings while he was on death row.
I remember seeing some of them. Pretty disturbing stuff.
And people actually buy them?
They do, and for a lot of money. I mean, thousands, sometimes even hundreds of thousands of dollars.
It's so strange, right? The art of a serial killer.
Yeah, it really makes you question the whole idea of separating the art from the artist.
Like, can you even do that?
Should you?
And what about the victims' families? How must they feel knowing that someone's profiting off Gacy's legacy?
Right. It's a really complicated issue, ethically speaking. And then there's the question of whether nonprofits should accept money from the sale of this art.
Yeah, I've heard of organizations wrestling with that.
It's tough. Do you use the money for good, knowing where it came from, or do you just say, no, this is wrong?
There are no easy answers.
It really makes you think about the whole idea of commodifying evil, profiting off of something so horrific.
It circles back to Gacy himself, right?
It does. I mean, was he just trying to express himself through his art? Or was it all just another manipulation, a way to control his image, his legacy?
Like he was trying to shape how people would remember him.
It's almost like he was turning himself into a brand.
A very disturbing brand.
Exactly. And it really gets to the heart of our question. Grifter, or gifted, was it genuine self-expression or just another calculated move?
It's hard to say for sure.
It is, but I think it's a question worth exploring as we try to understand the mind of John Wayne Gacy.
It's a lot to unpack, right? Trying to understand John Wayne Gacy. Like, how do you even begin to reconcile all these different pieces?
Yeah, it's like trying to solve a puzzle where the pieces just don't fit.
Right. A successful contractor involved in his community, and then a serial killer.
It's that psychology, right? That's the real mystery.
I mean, how can someone be both of those things? The charming guy everyone seems to like, and then this monster.
It really challenges what we think we know about human nature.
It's like he had two totally separate personalities.
And that's where this idea of compartmentalization comes in.
Compartmentalization.
Yeah, it's like a defense mechanism where people can separate these conflicting parts of themselves.
So it's like they can just shut off those bad impulses, those dark thoughts.
In a way, yeah. And Gacy seems to have been a master at it.
He was able to just, put on this mask for the world
Exactly. Hide his true nature.
and fool everyone.
He was incredibly manipulative.
Which brings us back to our big question, right? Grifter or gifted?
Yeah, was Gacy a visionary who went bad, or was he just a con man from the start?
Using his charisma to manipulate people.
It's tough to say for sure.
But if we're talking about manipulation, I mean, his charisma was definitely part of that.
It was a tool for him, absolutely.
He used it to lure his victims, to gain their trust.
And ultimately, to control them.
It makes you think about all those people who thought they knew him, who trusted him.
Yeah, and how betrayed they must have felt when the truth came out.
It's a reminder that we can't always judge a book by its cover, no matter how charming someone seems.
We have to be critical, be willing to question things, even when it's someone we think we know.
So where does that leave us with Gacy? Was he a grifter or was he gifted?
I think it's more complicated than a simple yes or no.
Okay, so how do we make sense of it then?
I think we have to acknowledge that Gacy was a master manipulator.
Okay.
He had this incredible ability to understand people, to know how to gain their trust.
Right.
But he also had this capacity for cruelty that's just, it's beyond comprehension.
It's like those two things were linked somehow.
I think you're right.
Like the charisma and the cruelty fed off of each other.
Exactly. And that's what makes this case so fascinating and so disturbing.
It really does make you question human nature.
It does. It shows us that the line between good and evil, it can be very
And that even the most charming people can be capable of terrible things.
which is why it's so important to be aware, to be vigilant,
To trust our gut instincts.
and to never stop questioning.
Well, that's about all the time we have for today. We've covered a lot of ground, and it's heavy stuff.
It is.
But hopefully, by exploring this case, we can learn something from it.
Maybe help prevent something like this from happening again.
It's a reminder to all of us to be careful, to be aware, and to never take things at face value.
Well said.
So until next time, keep those critical thinking skills sharp. And remember, in a world where charisma and controversy collide, it's up to each of us to discern the truth.
The truth?
To separate the visionaries from the con artists, the gifted from the grifters,